Century is an exhibition that brings together the work of 100 modern British artists from the Ingram collection and the Jerwood collection, two of the most important collections of modern British art in the country. There were quite a number of pieces involved, some of them relatively obscure, some of them famous names, people like Henry Moore, Barbara Hepworth, Eric Ravilius, John Piper, David Hockney, and sundry others. In fact, there are relatively few famous names of the 20th century that aren't represented in some shape or form.
I mean, I think it'll startle quite a few people, the sheer range and depth of what we were producing in that period. There's a sort of mood because, you know, 2 world wars, a lot of hardship after the First World War, and then the threat of nuclear war, the Korean War, you know, whatever, going on and on and on. And it's like they had limited palettes. There are a lot of blacks and browns, and little bits of orange and little bits of ultramarine. It's quite extraordinary. So there's a feeling of grittiness and darkness and challenge that is in quite a lot of the art. Albeit, of course, there are some pieces that lift you a bit and bring a real smile to your face.
Whatever the qualities of other periods of art, I think modern British so-called 20th century art and into the 21st century gives people, all of us, an opportunity to look as if it was a mirror, to see part of what our lives were and the lives which have formed us and our culture. If we're fortunate enough to hold these pictures, whether it be in a collection or whether it be personally, I think we gain a great deal of understanding about our humanity.
For me, it began as a sort of operation to look at what I felt were the strongest works in each collection, and particularly where they crossed over. Rather than arrange Century as a historical survey, I thought it'd be more interesting and more fun to arrange the work thematically, to make it a sort of journey through the different moods, the different ambitions of 20th century British art. So what I hope is that as people go from room to room, they will have different experiences, different moods. Some are quite solemn and quiet, some are very exuberant, and here and there are some fairly major surprises that I think people will kind of stop and stare when they see them. This is the work News by William Roberts from 1941, and it's gouache on paper, and it's a very beautiful little piece. During the war, Roberts moved to Oxford to get away from the bombing. And while he was there, he studied people going into the local library to find out news of how the war was progressing, and also to find out about their loved ones and so forth. And it's interesting because Roberts was an artist who stylized figures a lot. He was not a sort of naturalistic painter. But these are not caricatures. There's a very strong sense of their feelings being expressed here. One senses in these figures their distress and anxiety, and yet the whole picture is so wonderfully composed and has such lovely colours in it that the whole kind of atmosphere is actually quite uplifting. I particularly like the little "silence please" sign at the top showing that we're in a library, and it's quite an intimate picture, a rather lovely record of wartime life. One of the fascinating things about studying art in this period is that it was the era when photography and film threatened to take away from traditional media the role of portraying life in visual art. What we found, though, is that rather than become irrelevant, the artists had their own extremely valuable input into British culture at the time. and also expressed the experience of life in the 20th century in ways that photography and film, for example, couldn't do. This is The Corner by Paul Nash, a watercolour made in 1919, a time when Nash was trying to rediscover himself as what he called a war artist without a war. During the war, he painted landscapes of destruction in which the trees had all been destroyed. Here he's celebrating the wonderful, exuberant life of a wood. Curiously, he's actually written the names of the trees on the piece. So we can see, for example, here it says lime, and here it says maple. And yet he has abstracted and redesigned the trees, the structures of the trees, to create this lovely kind of flowing, cascading impression of foliage. And then holding everything in check is this brick wall which kind of contains the exuberant life of nature.
Well, I think the show, it's obviously one of the biggest of its kind, and the very fact that the theme is two private collectors, is a bit of a reminder to other people that actually just because you've got great work, you don't have to sort of have it behind high walls and you look at it, at 3 o'clock in the morning so nobody else can see it or whatever. It's completely reverse. The point is let other people enjoy it. I mean, I get huge enjoyment from seeing other people enjoy and appreciate the art. I mean, it gives me a real buzz. Well, I think a lot of private collectors would feel the same way if only they let themselves go a bit, I suppose, and shared.
To collect with an unlimited pocket would be one of life's great pleasures. For most of us, that doesn't happen. And what I've done is collected what I've enjoyed, collected for Jerwood what I like, collected also what I think other people would like to look at, and I think this is somewhat underrated. The object of hanging something in a gallery like our Jerwood gallery is to give pleasure to people, and when they look at something, I think they need to recognize it a little as something that might have touched them in their lives or in their minds or in their reading. And if that's happened, then suddenly they're able to look at something which means for them, reminds them, gives them pleasure. And that, I think, has always been in my mind.